It all started off normally. My boyfriend and I had been dating for 6 months, but the odd behavior of his mother made me start asking questions. At first, it was just small signs, but gradually I began to sense something unusual in the way they interacted. Even though he always said his mother just needed attention, the strange feelings within me grew stronger. One time, I heard odd noises in the house, and I began to wonder, am I just imagining things? Since I started living with my boyfriend, everything seemed normal. We had been dating for 6 months after 3 years of friendship, and I thought this was the beginning of a happy relationship. We lived in his mother's house, a 60-year-old woman who had raised him alone since he was a child. My boyfriend often told me that after her divorce from his father, his mother fell into depression and never fully got over it. His father remarried, and that only made her sadness worse, so she never sought another relationship. I understood that his mother was going through a lot of pain and loneliness, but what I witnessed during my time living with them made me feel uneasy. Every time my boyfriend spent time with me, his mother would show clear jealousy, as though she didn't want him to have anyone else but her. He had told me before that his mother always felt jealous of his girlfriends, and this had happened with every girl before me. Honestly, I started feeling uncomfortable with how present she was in our relationship. She rarely talked to me, and usually avoided me when I tried to interact. Whenever she came home, she would retreat into her room, never participating in any shared activities. While my boyfriend insisted that she liked me and treated me kindly, I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There were repeated situations where, for instance, when we went out to get food, she would always say she didn't want anything. But when we returned, she'd complain that we only cared about ourselves and didn't think about her. It was as if she was trying to guilt trip him, pulling him back towards her, even though he wasn't doing anything wrong. This feeling grew stronger each time I noticed how my boyfriend behaved around her. He was always ready to do anything she asked, constantly taking care of her. I knew he loved his mother, but there were times when it felt like he was going overboard in his care, even to the point where it seemed like their relationship was more than what I expected. I asked him about it, but every time, he just reassured me that it was natural for him to take care of her and that there was nothing strange about it. I couldn't deny that I had started to feel worried. Although I couldn't find a clear explanation for this feeling, there was something in the silence between us and his mother's actions that I couldn't ignore. Every time she was around, I felt like an outsider, and I always had to step aside in every situation. Was I overthinking? Or was there something genuinely wrong in this family? One Saturday morning, everything started out as usual. My boyfriend and I woke up, went through our morning routines, and decided to play a few games on the PS5, just like we did on weekends before. I was feeling tired because of my pregnancy, so after a few games, I decided to take a nap. He turned off the PS5 and put on a YouTube video a little loud. He said he would make me breakfast while I napped, then left the room. I didn't think much of it when he went into his mother's room, as he often goes in there to talk to her for a while. I'm a heavy sleeper, so I didn't expect to hear anything out of the ordinary. But a few minutes later, I woke up to loud banging sounds, something like banging against the wall. I heard the door open, and then I heard him say, "Oh, so you want to do that, huh?" The banging continued, now sounding like it was right outside the door. The mumbling I could hear sounded similar to the way he talks to me when we're alone. At that moment, I felt chills run down my spine, unable to believe what I was hearing. I got up from the bed and sat in front of the TV, trying to make sense of the noises. The banging stopped as soon as I did that, almost like they had heard me wake up and paused whatever they were doing. I then heard shuffling and his mother saying, "Lie," and him replying, "Yes, ma'am." He went downstairs for a few minutes and then came back with a bowl of cereal, which was strange because he usually made a full breakfast with pancakes, bacon, eggs, and hash browns. I immediately asked him what that noise was, and he looked nervous, saying, "I was arguing with my mom." I pressed him further, asking what the argument was about, and he started stuttering nonsense, saying it was about a Christmas gift. That explanation didn't make sense to me at all. I asked if the argument had gotten physical because I heard loud noises, and he insisted no, nothing like that happened. I kept pressing him, asking if he was moving furniture or something because the noise was so loud. He began pacing around the room nervously and quietly said, "I am filled with regret." After about an hour of questioning, he just kept saying he didn't know what noise I was talking about, and I started to feel like I was going crazy. I knew what I had heard, but I didn't want to believe it. It was hard to accept that something so twisted could be going on, especially with me being pregnant and sleeping right next door. Later that night, I brought it up again, hinting that I thought something inappropriate had happened, or maybe the argument had become physical and he should feel comfortable telling me. He then said, "Want me to ask my mom if we were hitting each other?" He went into her room and asked her, telling her I thought they had fought. She texted him afterward, saying, "It's just pregnancy hormones. You're overthinking," followed by, "We don't live like that." I spent the next day thinking about everything and came to the conclusion that I wasn't crazy. I knew exactly what I had heard. I started to remember other odd things that had happened in the past, like strange comments between him and his mother, things that had made me uneasy, some things I had overheard, like him saying, "I can still feel around," followed by her laughing, or them in the kitchen arguing and him asking her, "How can I be better for you?" All of these pieces started to fit together, but the more I thought about it, the more I didn't want to believe it. Something was definitely wrong, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. Since that incident, I couldn't stop thinking about the strange things that had been happening between my boyfriend and his mother. Even though he continued to deny it and told me I was overthinking, I couldn't shake the feeling from what I had heard. The strange noises, their cryptic conversations in tense situations, all of it didn't add up with the explanations he gave. The more I tried to rationalize it, the more unsettled I felt. One day, when we were at home together, I noticed even more odd behavior from him and his mother. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As I was lying in bed, feeling tired, I started hearing noises coming from his mother's room. First, there were footsteps, then the sound of the door opening quietly, unlike usual. What was strange was that I didn't hear her stomping down the stairs like I usually did. There was something different about the way they were moving and acting, as if they thought I wouldn't hear. A sense of unease grew within me, and I sat up, listening more closely. After a few minutes, I heard those strange sounds from downstairs again. Like the last time, these noises didn't sound like the usual sounds from around the house. They were more like something being hit or slammed. I couldn't stop thinking that he and his mother might be doing something I wasn't supposed to know about. Even though I tried to convince myself I was overthinking, the feeling wouldn't go away. When he came back into the room, I asked him what took so long and why he was downstairs for so long. His response was vague, and he seemed nervous when I brought up his mom. When I asked him if they had been downstairs together, he hesitated and just said he had made me some soup. But I knew something was off, especially after I remembered how, the last time, when he went to his mom's room and came back with just a bowl of cereal instead of a full breakfast like he usually made me. I then pressed him about what happened the previous day, about the strange noises I had heard, and I felt like something was being hidden from me. He still wouldn't admit to anything. He even got angry and accused me of being too sensitive. But I couldn't stop the feeling that he was lying. The signs were becoming too obvious. No matter how he denied or explained it away, I couldn't erase what I had heard and felt. At that point, I began reflecting on everything that had happened before. The things he had said about his mother, the weird situations when they were together, and the offhand comments he made about the past. Everything started to click in my mind. The feelings of anxiety, the signs I had ignored before, they were all starting to piece together into a clearer picture. Maybe I wasn't just misinterpreting things. Something truly wrong was happening in this house. Since I started having doubts about the strange relationship between my boyfriend and his mother, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. The suspicions slowly turned into anxiety, and I couldn't explain why everything seemed so off. Even though he tried to deny it, Every time I observed their behavior, I felt that something was wrong. The things he said about his mother, his nervousness when I asked questions, everything made me feel uneasy. Today, everything seemed to repeat itself. We were sitting watching TV when I heard his phone buzz. He quickly glanced at it, sighing a bit as he checked the messages, but didn't explain anything to me. His mother had been texting him a lot, asking what he was doing, when he would come home, and then sending more messages full of reproach. I couldn't help but notice how strange it was that she was constantly checking up on him, like she had some kind of control over him. It felt like he couldn't escape her grip, and that made me very uncomfortable. Later, I overheard a conversation between him and his mother in the kitchen. He was trying to speak gently, but I could hear the worry in his voice. "I don't want to make you sad, don't worry," he said. But this sentence, combined with how carefully he chose his words, made me feel like something was really off. My instincts flared up again, and I knew I had to confront the truth. When he came back into the room, I couldn't hold back anymore. I began asking him about the messages I had seen, the conversation I overheard in the kitchen, and the strange way he was acting around his mother. He became nervous again and wouldn't make eye contact. "I don't know why you're thinking like this. She just cares about me," he said. But I didn't feel convinced. He added that his mother was just worried because I was pregnant and afraid I might leave him. But this explanation couldn't possibly cover everything I had witnessed. At this point, I felt like I was facing an unsolvable situation. The signs I had seen were becoming clearer, and I couldn't continue living in this uncertainty. I asked him once again about his relationship with his mother, wondering if I was misunderstanding something. His answer was vague, unclear. Even though he kept insisting there was nothing wrong, I felt the opposite. The doubts continued to creep into my mind, and I couldn't take it anymore. Was I overreacting and seeing things negatively? Or was there really something dark going on that I wasn't able to fully understand? The feeling of unease and anxiety built up inside me, and I couldn't keep living in this uncertainty any longer. After increasingly noticing the strange signs between my boyfriend and his mother, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The confusion and fear had become unbearable. I couldn't continue living in this uncertainty. His explanations didn't erase the images I had witnessed, and the feeling that something wasn't right only grew stronger. Even though he kept insisting there was nothing unusual, I felt like I was facing a dark secret that I couldn't unravel. One evening, while we were sitting together in the room, he received a call. I could clearly see the tension in his face as he looked at the phone screen, but he didn't answer. At that moment, his mother texted him. I couldn't help but notice the overly controlling relationship between them. Her messages were always full of control, sometimes reproachful, sometimes overly concerned. And I knew that, beneath her calm demeanor, something was very strange. He left the room for a while, and I didn't see him return right away. I only heard his footsteps going downstairs. I couldn't help but be curious, so I decided to follow him. When I got near the stairs, I unexpectedly overheard his voice and his mother's from downstairs. His voice was low and anxious, while she maintained a calm tone. However, in their words, I could sense an unusual tension. He mentioned something about coming back late, but she insisted he returned sooner. Somehow, I felt an eerie atmosphere in the air. I stood there, anxious, but not daring to step further, unable to take my eyes off the situation. The sense of unease grew stronger, and I began to wonder if all of this was real or if it was just a product of my overly sensitive imagination. The more I thought, the more it felt like everything was slipping out of my control. When he returned to the room, I decided not to stay silent anymore. I started talking about my unease, asking him if something was really going on between him and his mother. I didn't want to keep living in uncertainty and fear. He seemed overwhelmed when I began to ask these questions. He stammered and didn't know how to respond, only saying that everything was fine and that his mother was just concerned for him. But I couldn't believe it anymore. I no longer trusted his words, and that hurt me. This relationship, with all its oddities and tension, seemed to be throwing me into chaos. I knew I couldn't continue living with this doubt. My love for him wasn't strong enough to cover up the warning signs that were becoming clearer and clearer. Was I overreacting? Or was there really something wrong going on? I didn't know what to do next, but I knew I couldn't keep enduring this feeling.